Well, good day, my friends, and welcome to another Common Communion. My name is Jonathan Brandenburg, and I get to be the pastor at Christ Lutheran Church and School in beautiful Ranchos Palos Verdes, California. Get to be your host here today. And it is just so good to be back with you guys. Wow. We're getting deep into the Advent season. We're getting deep into being closer and closer to Christmas and all the beauty and craziness that entails. And not only Christmas, of course, New Year's Eve as well, and New Year's Day. So I hope everybody is doing okay, surviving the holidays so far. And I just want to share a little bit of joy with you today. I know, right? Joy. When we hear that word, it's so good. You're like, oh, I'm gonna hear some joy today. I'm gonna get some joy today. It's almost as rare as hope and as peace, the last couple topics we've talked about. But I love this idea of joy because for actually most of my life, if I'm honest, I didn't really understand the difference between joy and happiness. And I've been thinking about that. What is the difference between joy and happiness? And I'm thinking over and over to myself, I think it's more about accessibility. I talked about this even this morning when I was preaching at my local church about this. I was like, happiness is so accessible. I know it's hard. I know a lot of us would say we struggle with happiness, and right on. So true. But happiness is so accessible because happiness is this simplicity of emotion that just puts a smile on a face or makes us laugh or entertains us enough where we can be a little bit more lighthearted even in the face of lots of challenges and struggles in life. It's this beautiful simplicity about happiness, and it's accessible all around us. Yet joy, I just think joy is less accessible. And I think this comes from, and maybe some of us use the word happiness like joy, but this deep down joy, like feel it to my bones kind of, that mixes contentment with passion, with peace, with, you just keep adding, right? Joy has all these layers to it. And yet joy, I think, is so much less accessible to us because in so many ways, I kind of put this forward almost as a proposal, I'm really becoming more and more convinced that we can't just produce joy, that we have to have something else, and I would argue someone else to give us the gift of joy. I know that sounds a little crazy, but hear me out. Again, happiness is controllable, and it's a tamed emotion in many ways. As much as we struggle to get our hands around it, trust me, to be happy, I think infinitely more we struggle with joy. And I think that's because the joy that we really crave is a gift from the outside of ourselves. This joy, in so many ways, is a gift from the most important people in our world. And it's, again, I think it's grounded in someone. You could argue some things might bring a joy, but I would argue it's always a someone. And I think that even the person itself, if it's a person, doesn't even know they're giving joy. Have you ever walked away from a coffee conversation with a dear old friend and just felt that deep joy? And yet, if you ask that person, it's like, did you give deep, abiding joy to your friend today? You're like, I don't know, I just had coffee with them, right? And I think there's this gifting of that interpersonalness. There's this gifting of relationship that brings about joy. Like, it gives the gift of joy, but the problem is we can't really access it anytime we want to. We can't sort of demand it out of a person. And even the person itself doesn't know if they're giving joy, if they're just giving companionship, they're giving friendship, they're giving happiness. They don't know what they're giving. and they can't control it. We can't control it on our side of how we give it or how we receive it, and they can't even control it on their side for giving it. So in other words, I think, again, this happiness is this tamed, docile thing, and like a beautiful Labrador, if you're a dog person, it just always sits and is just always there. It has that weird dog smile for you, where I think joy is like that crazy, snuggly barn cat. I grew up in Kansas, so I knew a few snuggly, barn cats, and that you don't know when it shows up, you don't know when it's going to leave, but when it shows up, it lets you pet its soft fur, and it purrs, and it's like all good, and then it disappears for 2 weeks. And thinking about that, I really think the scriptures, because as a pastor I read a lot of scriptures, guys, but I really think the Bible, the writers, especially writers like Isaiah the prophet, and King David, the writer of lots of parts of Psalms, even King Solomon of Proverbs and Ecclesiastes, I think these guys, the more I read scripture, I think these guys kind of understood this. Because every time this sort of unexpected thing happened, like the unexpected reunion with a family member, or this unexpected falling in love, or this unexpected moment of even the pregnancy or the birth of a child, all these when an important person shows up on the scene, they don't just describe it with gladness or happiness. They give it that extra thing that says, and they had exceeding joy. So much joy that overflowed into this other thing, this action of joy called rejoicing. Every single time almost. But no greater, of course, than when God would show up on the scene. Because again, like I said earlier, I think people have no control over how we receive joy or even how we give it. It just sort of happens in those interactions. And yet when God shows up on the scene, now that God of scriptures seems to have more control over that. God can step into a space and say, I'm going to give you joy. There's going to be happiness, gladness around as well, but I'm going to give you a joy that will overflow into rejoicing. And how this looks for our Advent season is the idea of waiting. And I bring up the prophet Isaiah because our reading for this week in Advent actually comes from Isaiah 35. And I love Isaiah 35 in many ways, but it has this metaphor, this image of the wilderness. And I like to call it the wilderness of the world. And in the wilderness, all the usual things are happening. Things aren't growing, death, even things like fear, anxiety, things run around in the wilderness that cripples people, whether physically, mentally, emotionally, or spiritually. That's the wilderness for you. And yet, the wilderness in Isaiah 35 is going to experience sort of these floodwaters, these waters of life that are going to birth out new life. It's going to flood over the entire wilderness world there, and that, of course, floodwaters is going to be God. It's going to be the Lord Almighty. And when the Lord shows up, things overflow. Life and new growth start happening. A new season begins to happen. The people who were trapped in fear and anxiety are told that strength, courage are theirs. People who have been crippled physically, emotionally, spiritually are told that there's healing, that there's a newness of life for them and a new day, and that fear doesn't get to run the show anymore. And it's funny how when the Lord shows up to bring joy, to think about this, God's going to bring joy to all these situations of the wilderness of life. But in Isaiah 35, it says he's going to come with vengeance and recompense. I love these two words. And basically, you can, another two words for this, coming sort of in that Hebrew world, is that God's going to come with a grudge, and God's going to act. And it almost makes, guys, I love this thought, it almost makes God, who's the joy bringer, he almost sounds like John Wick. I mean, I don't know about you. He totally sounds like John Wick, the joy bringer, but that's how joy is going to be brought by God. It's going to be brought in intentionality. It's going to be brought with a lot of action because God has a grudge. And it's funny, in Isaiah 35, he doesn't have a grudge against any people. It's, I think, a very unique thing about Isaiah 35. But he has a grudge against fear. He has a grudge against anxiety. He has a grudge against violence. He has a grudge against casting people based on their disability, their disease, their diagnoses. He has a grudge against a lot of things, but it's not against people. It is against all these things that make the wilderness the wilderness. And he's done with it. He's tired of it. He's going to bring something very new. And it's going to create a journey. It's going to create a space for people to walk along, to sort of embrace that joy in a journey or in a path. And I love this. And I think this is exactly what it means for us. Because, we're still in a wilderness. We're still in a wilderness. Jesus has come, baby born in Bethlehem. God has shown up, Emmanuel, all that kind of great stuff. But it isn't completed. The vision of Isaiah 35 isn't completed. It is going to be completed one day, my friends. One day, Jesus is going to come back and I guess finish all this work, and Isaiah 35's vision will be perfected, completed. But now we still walk in the wilderness. How many of us still struggle with fear? Like real fear, guys. How many of us struggle with real anxiety, stress, panic attacks? How many of us are describing, again, Isaiah 35 goes through it, how many of us are lame or blind? How many of us are poor? And again, maybe not just physically or monetarily, there's other ways to be lame. There's other ways to be blind. There's other ways to be poor than the way we usually think about them. And that is wilderness. And this is where you can't just overlay joy. It's the holiday seasons. Be joyful. It didn't work that way. It's the holiday seasons. Be happy. It doesn't even work that way. There's moments of smiling. There's moments of laughter. There's moments of being distracted by entertainment, of course. There is a certain sense of happiness and gladness with the holiday seasons that's almost built in. But in some ways, that makes it even harder to wrap our hands around joy. In some ways, that's even harder to wrap our hands around happiness because it's so overlaid on us, so forced on us in the holiday season. They were like, no. My wilderness actually comes to light even more because of this holiday overlay, because of this forced happiness or this coerced idea of joy. But the wilderness is still there. The wilderness is all around us. And yet, my friends, here's the thing. God still holds a grudge. God still holds a John Wick moment. Excuse me. For this fear. Excuse me, guys. Ooh. And he's still acting. And he wants you to be close. And so in this season, I'm kind of going around in my head, and again, how do I find joy? It's not an overlay. It's not a forced thing. It's not a coerced thing. How do I find joy? In this holiday season, even when I experience fear or anxiety, or if I realize that I'm crippled in some ways, or lame in some ways, blind in so many ways, what do? I think this is why the cliche has a lot of truth to it. Stay close to Jesus. If we really want to find joy, like true joy, stay close to Jesus. See what he's up to in this season. Stay close to the joy bringer, because he has a grudge against fear and anxiety. He has a grudge against those things that would cripple us. And so, if there is true joy, and I believe there is in this holiday season, it will be found still in Emmanuel, God with us, Jesus. And so that's what I pray for each and every one of us. That as we find moments of happiness throughout this holidays, absolutely, that we also find true moments of joy. We might have to wait for them. Might have to wait a long time for them. But that those moments of joy finds us as we stay close to the one who found us, Jesus. May that Jesus bring joy to you this season. Amen. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Sorry about that little coughing episode. I got a little choked up and then I got a little coughing. I really do pray for joy for you guys, for all of us in this holiday season. And I pray for a wonderful lead up to Christmas and of course New Year's as well. And just stay safe out there, y'all. It's a crazy time. You all know it's a beautiful time. It's a crazy time. So enjoy those happy moments, but even more, embrace those joyful moments as they find you. And when they do, don't be afraid to rejoice. All right. I'll see you next time, my friends, here on The Common Communion. But until then, stay safe. Be well. Bye.